Hello, chess fans. It's Craig again, bringing you another edition of Mastery of the Opening and Mastery of the Middle Game. Now, today we're going to be talking about the Sicilian defense. Today we're going to be talking about the Najdorf variation. Najdorf variation, however you want to pronounce it. Now, when people play e4, you can respond with a kind of a passive defense. In other words, you're defending, against this attack. Or you can respond in an active, counter-attacking, aggressive manner. So, I'm a Sicilian player. I believe that this is Black's most aggressive way to combat e4. e4 is aggressive. c5 is kind of aggressive also. So you fight aggression with aggression. Now the Najdorf variation arises after knight f3, d6, d4, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, knight f6. This pawn's attacked, so it's good for white to develop a piece. So it's good to combine defense and attack. And now we have a three main lines here for Black. You can play the dragon variation, you can play the classical variation, this is a good one, or this mysterious little pawn move invented, over 70 years ago by Miguel Najdorf. Grandmaster Najdorf was one of the top players in the world, and he was the main guy who played this cunning little pawn move. a6, it's on the fifth move, and Bobby Fischer was the one that adopted this line. He fell for this idea in the late 1950s. It generally leads to very sharp positions in the main lines. Now, it's more of a counterattack. It's a fighting defense, which has withstood the test of time over the last 70 years of practice. Often the game's decided at the grandmaster level in the first 20 moves. It can get that sharp. Sometimes Black's king stays in the center, which makes it, a little bit of a risky defense. Now, I never played the Najdorf that much when I was a serious player. Why is that? Well, after a while, it was analyzed to death. Everybody knew the main lines. So, the critical positions arise very quickly. There's not a lot of maneuvering in the sharp lines. I'm a positional player. I like to, move the pieces around. I don't like to, every move, woo! Every move critical. I don't like that too much. So, and I remember playing a grandmaster once. I had the white pieces. We played into a main line, bishop g5, and you know what he did for the next 20 moves? Whipped out all of his moves in 1 minute. That scared the bejesus out of me. Whenever you go into these main lines, they spend years analyzing these lines. And how much time had I spent on this line? I'd never seen it before, so I was completely out of my element. So that's what happens when you play down a line that's heavily analyzed like this. But anyway, when they spend years on these, lines, and they're so dedicated, that's why I never reached the top level. And I wasn't willing to give up my life for the game. That's a whole nother level, guys. Unless you crack the top 10 in the world, you really won't make much money as an American professional player. Anyway, the Najdorf never really suited my, style. I was always a positional player. I like positions where there's not that much happening. You can kind of maneuver your pieces, But this game I played was only played a couple of weeks ago on chess.com, and I had the black pieces against a player named Pivo, rated 2236. And what I can do is kind of show you some ideas in the opening and show you some new ideas in the middle game. Now my opponent played a very solid bishop e2. This is one of White's very good 6 moves. h3 has become more popular because of Karyakin, and this is Fischer's move. But you can also play f4, bishop c4, bishop g5 as the main line. But anyway, now I'm supposed to play e5, but instead I play Gary's move, Gary Kasparov's e6, which maintains fluidity. Once you play e5, then you have kind of a you sort of committed the pawn structure, but black is not committing, is more committed to a fluid structure, which is more dynamic. Bishop e3 is a very good developing move. Now, both sides are preparing to castle. And now a lot of you can get to this position, but now you got to think, now what am I going to do after I castle? Where do the pieces go? One thing you can do is simply bring out the knight to c6, or you could even bring the knight out to d7. But in this line, the queen normally belongs on c7, where it can exert good pressure along the half-open c file. So I did play queen c7. Now one of the most aggressive things that White can do is start pushing this pawn, threatening either e5 or f5. And this, a lot of people, you don't do that. You keep the pawn back here, or you put the knight blocking the pawn, and White can never get much out of that because he doesn't have any pawn aggression or pawn attack going. So f4 is correct. Now I decided there's 2 ways I can bring the knight. I could bring the knight out here. This is what Kasparov played in the final game of the World Championship. But I played this way so that there will be no exchanges of pieces. And that makes it a much more dynamic game. King h1 is kind of a waiting move. White is not sure what to do, but here maybe he has a good way to bring the bishop back for more safety. Now I went crazy here. I went like this. This is crazy. Okay, why the heck? What the heck am I doing? Well, my king is not under any immediate threat. And meanwhile, I might be able to bring my knight in here and, you know, create some pressure, or I can even think about advancing the pawn down here where it will be very strong. So there is a method to my madness, but much more safe and reliable. Simply black should just simply castle, but I wanted to kind of get the other guy out of book, and this is a good strategy once you're over 2000 in the advanced class. g6 is interesting. Again, I'm trying to anticipate f5, pawn takes pawn, e5, and I'm developing a nice center. So that's the idea behind g6. See, I'm leaving my king in the center, which is a little bit risky. Queen e1. Now, it's not clear what he's trying to do here, but I can just continue my plan of h4, h3. Now, if h3, then I have a nice... So if I go here, and then he responds this way, I have a nice resting spot for my knight on g3. So that's the idea behind the advance of the rook pawn, which is kind of advanced, and it's kind of risky. So I came in here, knight g4. I want to try to get the 2 bishops here.
Call from span 650.
So this is a good way to retreat. So now I play b5. Trying to develop. I gotta get this guy developed, right? So b5 is a very aggressive way to do that. Now he's putting pressure on the knight. Now I might sacrifice here because I'm just trying to get the 2 bishops here. So I did sacrifice. Now he's afraid of the pawn coming b4, so he plays a3. And now I see there's a hole here. Remember, in the middle game, guys, what we're trying to do is get our pieces into holes, and the knight is perfectly suited for that particular hole. And this, in the Sicilian, this is one of the holes that are generally available for you. So I just decided, well, I'm going to put my knight into this hole. And you can't protect the hole because now I simply take the knight. So this is a good invasion square for me. Now he decides to capture the knight. And now I'm going to be down a pawn. And you're going, oh no, you're down a pawn. You're down a pawn. Well, am I worried about that? Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that. But maybe I have some activity in the form of, this open file. Maybe I have some compensation, and I have the two bishops. So at this point, okay, I'm a little bit worried about being pawned down, but I'm going to continue to play. Now I could have castled here, queenside, but I decided not to castle here and just leave my king in the center. Although the computer doesn't like that. The computer does not like my king there and recommends quick attack with f5, which I agree with. White should try to strike, get to the king before I get to your king. Now I came in with a knight. This is very powerful. This knight is very strong. It attacks stuff. And it's just a great penetration square. So he defends. Now white kind of is passive, and this is what we know as compensation for the pawn. Now the computer recommends e5 here, which is a good move. But I decided to wait here. I'm just waiting, waiting for Godot. Now c3 is a consolidating move. And now this is my idea, queen b7. I'm attacking that pawn, and it's very difficult to defend the pawn. How are you defending the pawn? If you play rook e1, I take this pawn. You don't ever want to lose that pawn. If you play like knight f2, I'm still going to take that pawn. So this pawn is just very hard to defend. So he came up here trying to get rid of my best piece, but just give me that. Huh? Give me that. And now black is actually winning because you've lost your center pawn, and the queens are coming off. And black has the two bishops. Now I could have taken with a pawn, but I decided to take with a rook. The computer doesn't like rook takes that much. And now queen takes queen, and black simply has the better end game because he has the two bishops. But see, the problem in chess is you can get a great game, you can get a winning position, but you still have to win it. The hardest thing in chess is to win one game. And black definitely has a superior position, but he still has to bring his ship into the harbor, and that is not easy for most players. So now here, this is a good consolidating move. Now I still have to decide, hey, what am I going to do with these pawns? I've got all these pawns. Am I going to push e5? Am I going to push d5? What am I going to do? Now I immediately blundered. This is, this looks so natural. Why not create a good outpost for the bishop? The computer likes e5 because later on I'm going to have to battle for these squares. And this is just a real mistake on my part. King g1 is good, get the king out of danger. And now, I have to decide, what am I going to do now? Rook c8. g3 is good. Rook h7. See, now he's actually making some terrific moves. and getting a good position, because you cannot allow all this pressure on the king side. So these are excellent moves by white. And I'm trying to get f6 in so that he doesn't take over the dark square. I have to get f6 in. Knight f3 threatens check. So f6 is forced. Notice that when you have holes, you've got to cover them in chess, or else your opponent is going to invade on these very holes. Okay, king f2 is good. You know, the end game is good to bring your king up toward the center. You got to use the king. Now what is this? I'm going backwards. Well, there's a method to my madness. I'm trying to get the king to a better square. Bishop d4. This is my idea. I'm trying to consolidate this pawn mass over here. This is good. He's got to put pressure on these dark squares, and he wants me to play f5, which I'm not going to do. You cannot allow the opponent to enter to create holes. You can't create holes in chess. Now both sides are just kind of moving around. What am I going to do? This attack here is called the minority attack, where he's got 3, I've got 2, but yet I'm attacking down on the queen side. It's not clear what white is doing here, but it's also not clear what I'm doing here. You know, I'm just trying to prevent his pawns from, see, he might play g4, g5 and open up holes over here. So I have to prevent g4, g5. Now white's kind of meandering around. He's in a little bit of time pressure. He's got about 2 minutes left. So I just said, oh, I'm going to go for it. Let's go for this minority attack. Pawn takes, pawn takes. Now he's got the file. So I kept capturing. Now I've got this weakness, but it's well guarded. So I decided, well, I can't allow you to infiltrate, so I got to oppose. Now he comes back. And now I came up with a very good plan. If I can get e5 in, I have a superior position, and he should not ever allow e5. Once I get e5 in, it's going to be downhill for white. Knight f3. Now I'm trying to, get my rook in here and penetrate. So he comes up. King is now kind of a target. This is probably not that good. Now, I have to maybe try to get, anyway, I'm just trying to, prevent counterplay. Now comes a real lemon. This is a lemon, okay? Now, e5 wins a piece, because pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. And it turns out this bishop has no squares here. So rook check, king e6.